welcome to our latest White Pod. I'm Stephen Blaine, your host with White Labs, an e-commerce marketing agency. Today's guest is Shraysi. Shraysi, feel free to let our viewers know a little bit about yourself and share your background.
Sure. So I am the co-founder and CEO of Kidsy. Kidsy is a newly launched startup that focuses on buying liquidated overstock, customer returned, open box inventory from all the leading retailers and brands, and we sell it to our consumers at deep discounts. We are headquartered in Chicago. We have our warehousing operations in Sioux City, which is on the border of Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota, and we ship nationwide.
Awesome. Well, feel free to talk more about your products. I have a 2-year-old daughter, so I'm very interested now after looking at your website. Feel free to talk about your products.
I'll send you a discount code once we're done talking. So we really focus on selling baby and kids products across all the categories except clothing, shoes, and accessories. That's a category we don't do, and that was a very deliberate decision because it's a very saturated market. And plus we find that kids clothing, unlike say women's clothing or men's clothing, already comes at a much lower price point. So parents aren't always seeking out such a discount in that department. Where we really make a dent is on some of those higher ticket items like car seats, strollers, bouncers, swings, play yards, Wi-Fi cameras. Toys is another really big category that moves really well for us, and furniture pieces as well.
Awesome. What inspired you to get into this industry and business in general?
So it's, my path is pretty nonlinear as to how I arrived here. I come from a journalism background. I've been a journalist for almost a decade, predominantly focusing on business and finance. That was my beat. So I worked at places like Bloomberg TV, ABC News, CGTN, and then I left the world of news to go direct a feature documentary. So very similar to the startup world in the sense that it was an idea on the back of a napkin. I then went and pitched the story to a lot of film finance companies and executive producers, high net worth individuals, folks that really invest in social impact documentaries. Raised a ton of money for that. And then at the peak of filmmaking, we managed and hired 30 people across 6 time zones because we were filming in 6 countries. The focus of the documentary was actually child labor and child trafficking within the supply chains of the world's largest corporations. So essentially leveraged my investigative journalism background and spent close to 3 to 4 years really doing a deep dive in global supply chains. It was during this time that I learned about the supply chain industry within the United States as it relates to e-commerce and retail. Never thought in a million years I would really be doing anything with that nugget of information other than probably just saving it as something to share at dinner parties or with friends that had similar interests. We were then working on my second film, which was about the hunting and killing of albino men, women, and children in East Africa. You can see, Stephen, I have a real soft spot for those chick flicks. We were in pre-production on this film. It was during the pandemic when I found out I was pregnant with my first child. I now have 2 daughters under the age of 3. And as I started shopping for my daughter in my pregnancy, I remembered about sort of the liquidation industry and the inventory glut that retailers faced. And I thought to myself, well, why don't I be a really smart consumer? And instead of buying all these items at full price from all the retailers, why don't I go and source them from liquidation? So buy open box, buy overstocked items and surplus goods that I know exist in the market. And that's where I started to experience my first pain point, which was I knew this inventory existed, but myself as a consumer really didn't have access to it. And I was finding it in really obscure places like eBay and Facebook Marketplace and Mercari. And I'm not such a huge fan of P2P marketplaces. That's a whole separate conversation. But I was really looking for that one trusted company and brand where I could purchase liquidated inventory from. And it didn't exist. And so those were the early days of the wheels of Kidsy starting to really turn in my head.
What year did you start Kidsy?
So I shelved the second film in 2010, really started researching and just putting together contacts and information. And, again, as a journalist, sort of your first point of entry into anything is just interviewing. So I interviewed everyone from peers to friends to families to strangers to liquidation companies to brands to retailers, anyone that would talk to me. I was just trying to learn and put the pieces together. And that was really 20. And we've been in beta since then and officially launched in September 2020.
Awesome. So I feel like your target audience would be, you feel like I feel like I know your target audience, but do you have a specific target audience?
Yeah, our target audience is predominantly millennial and Gen Z parents, and also anyone that has a child in their life in any capacity. So on Kidsy, we also see a ton of grandparents shop on our
Hmm.
site, uncles and aunts who are shopping for baby registries or birthdays for their nieces and nephews or family members. We've seen a lot of teachers and folks that operate and run daycares and preschools shop on Kidsy as well, and any sort of caregiver. So anyone that has a child in any capacity in their life.
Awesome. What makes you different, or my favorite thing is better than your competitors?
So, I just first want to say there aren't many competitors in this space that are focused on liquidated baby and kids products in the particular sort of niche and vertical that we are focused on, which also makes it really exciting to build Kidsy because we're relatively swimming in what I would call a blue ocean, to borrow from a startup term. Some of the things that really set us apart from our competitors are the brand partnerships and relationships that we've developed over the last 2 years with liquidation companies, with baby and kids brands, with retailers, big box and small retailers as well in various parts of the country. That would be, I would say, our first differentiator, that we always have access to really great inventory at really great prices. The second differentiator is uniquely, compared to my competitors, I am not a solo entrepreneur in this endeavor. I have a co-founder, Sinan, who is also our COO and at one point was wearing the CTO hat. He's a software engineer and has been building and shipping products since he was in high school. And essentially, being a tech company, it's really important to have a partner along with you for the ride that inherently understands the operational and the technical side of the business. And through his expertise, we've been really able to develop strong internal data sets that tell us what inventory to be buying at what particular months and times. Of course, there was a great quote at Bloomberg that we used to use a lot when I worked there, which is, if you torture the data long enough, it will confess to whatever it is you want it to confess to.
Yeah.
So while I would say as a company, we're 80% data driven, 20 is use your brains, use your gut, use your intuition. But really it's the data that informs us in terms of our inventory procurement and our buying trends for the year.
Awesome. Well, you have a lot of products on here that I have used and my daughter still uses. What are your best-selling products?
They really vary. So some of them have come as a huge surprise to us. So when we started Kidsy, we didn't realize that feeding items would be such a hot button category, but that has proven to be that. I would say it's a mixed bag. If you look at sort of the items that have sold over the year, the yield is pretty wide. Car seats, strollers, durables. I feel anytime an item is over $100 and customers feel they can really get that deep discount, that's why they shop on Kidsy. We're like the TJ Maxx for the baby and kids space, except we're all online.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely have paid more than all of your prices on here. So it's great.
Well, not anymore, you won't.
Exactly. So what are some challenges in the last few years that you faced and how'd you overcome them?
Interesting. I think a lot of the challenges when you're running a startup is really building good habits in the early days and building the strong foundations that are essentially going to compound over the years. And so while it is painstaking to do, setting up systems in place for every department of your company is key and is oftentimes challenging because you as the co-founder or the CEO only have your own set of expertise. So it's been a really big learning curve, but bringing on the right people and the right partners to help you scale those learning curves is also really important. So setting up good internal data systems that help you with inventory procurement and buying, building partnerships and doing piloting some of those partnerships to see whether it's a good fit for you in the long run, putting in together, systems in place for customer service because we are a consumer facing business is a completely different model to the customer facing side of the business that we have with our brands because ultimately we're a B2B2C company. We're also working with AI and ML companies to help with operational efficiencies in our warehouse. And so really building those software systems and feeding the right data to it that could help us increase operational efficiency on the back end. So, I mean, there's a ton of stuff that is constantly being done, but I'm a big believer in, good habits compounding.
Awesome. So most of our listeners are entrepreneurs like yourself that have e-commerce brands. What are some activities you've done to promote your brand that have been successful?
So for the kids space, and every e-commerce and consumer company will find its own marketing and advertising strategies that are useful for them. For us in particular, I would say running ads on Google Shopping is really key because the way our consumers behave is that they actually search for a lot of the products on Google first. And then a lot of our consumers also obviously live on social media. And so running ads on social media as well and really sort of having like segmentation in your audience is also important. SEO is another great e-commerce strategy and really making sure that you are taking full advantage and optimizing keywords. But a lot of the work for the SEO is actually done on the back end of the product. So making sure that your product listings are really, really healthy. So in terms of the meta tags that you use, the categorization that you use, ensuring that the products are cataloged in the right way, that also can, be a huge boon to you on the front end of SEO. And then everything else that there's nothing I would say revolutionary that's being done on a marketing on an advertising side. The other part of it is also making sure that all your email flows are intact. Capturing customers that are doing product browsing or abandoned cart checkouts and ensuring the language is really customized and tailored to that specific customer is really, really important. And then also building like some sort of AI systems within your platform that can make really smart and targeted product recommendations to your customers that do end up checking out and can upsell and continue to increase those cart sizes. So yeah, I feel like on the advertising and marketing front, it's nothing revolutionary, but if you're able to really get those 4 or 5 things locked up, you could see tremendous amounts of traffic and conversion in your site.
I would agree with a lot of the things that you would say. What's your future plan for yourself and Kidsy?
Kidsy is growing at a rapid clip. So over the last 6 months, since we came out of beta, revenue has actually increased by 5x, and we're not seeing that number slow down anymore. We just actually closed our first fundraising round,
Awesome.
which we'll be announcing in the next week or two. So this, I think the publishing of this podcast might tie in really nicely with the fundraising announcement, which is exciting.
Awesome.
We've also brought on some really great brands that we're partnering with for Q2 and Q3 in this year. And ultimately, Kidsy's mission has always been the same, which is to be the leading destination for consumers that are both economically conscious and environmentally conscious as well.
Awesome. Great answer. Is there anything that I have not asked you that you want our viewers and listeners to know about Kidsy?
Yes. So a lot of people, tend to ask us, like, where do these products come from? And liquidation is one of those words that is so confusing, and it means sort of different things to different people. But really in our industry, within the e-commerce and retail space, liquidation today is approximately a $7 billion market annually within the United States. That's more than the total annual budget that the U.S. Department of Defense has on an annual basis. Wow. And what liquidation really is every time a customer returns an item to any big box store or retailer, it could be an Amazon, Target, Nordstrom, Macy's, Kohl's, Bloomingdale's, you name it, most of those items never get restocked or reshelved at those retailers because the cost of doing so is way too high. I mean, when you go drop off your Amazon return to UPS or wherever it is you do your Amazon returns from, a lot of customers just drop the box and never really think about the life cycle of that product from a supply chain perspective. And nor do they have to. But that product essentially is experiencing around 6 touch points as it makes its way back to the retailer's warehouse. And every single touch point it touches has a dollar amount associated with it. So by the time it reaches Amazon's warehouse or Target or wherever, it's way too capital intensive for them to restock it. And so it all gets shipped off to a liquidation warehouse. Anytime a company has ordered items from another country, from their manufacturing factory, and items get a little dented or dinged up during shipping and handling as it's being shipped on a shipping container to the United States, those items will never get shelved, be it on digital shelves or even your brick and mortar shelves. So those all end up in the liquidation pile as well. Anytime there's overstock, there's clearance, items that don't move, there's seasonality, those all end up in the liquidation warehouse. And every year on year, it's to the tune of almost $7 billion trillion. I mean, that's the official number, but if you look at some of the unofficial research, it could be up to $1 trillion as well. And so all this inventory exists, but it's not accessible to consumers. And so what we at Kidsy are doing is trying to be that bridge between one specific vertical, solving the retailer and returns pain point, and then bringing those to our customers. But I would encourage customers to actually look for open box and liquidated inventory across all categories.
Wow, it makes total sense. I mean, I never even thought about all this, so this is great, and I appreciate you coming on. I've learned a lot, and I think it's great for our listeners as well. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for your
Definitely.
time.